The Life, Teaching, and Legacy of Martin Luther. Chapter 5. Posting the 95 Theses. On October 31st, 1517, Martin Luther posted the 95 Theses against indulgences on the door of Castle Church in Wittenberg. In Luther's time, people used the door of the church building as a kind of bulletin board. The Theses were written assertions that were meant to form the basis of debates for teachers in the university and in the church. The 95 Theses were originally written in Latin, and Luther seemed to think that only a few theologians would debate them. 2 weeks after the 95 Theses were posted, however, they were translated into German and given to a printer. Soon, nearly everyone in Germany was discussing and debating the Theses. The 95 Theses may be understood according to 3 main points. 1. An objection to the avowed object of the expenditure. That is, Luther objected to the idea that the Pope can forgive sins. 2. A denial of the powers of the Pope over purgatory. 3. A consideration of the welfare of the sinner. When Luther wrote the 95 Theses, he seems to have held the view that forgiveness of sins came through the ministry of priests who derived their authority from Rome. Luther later held opposing views against the Pope and Roman Catholic teaching. At this time, however, Luther upheld Roman authority, as seen in Thesis 7. God remits guilt to no one whom he does not, at the same time, humble in all things and bring into subjection to his vicar, the priest. Overall, the Theses seem to indicate that, when they were written, Luther still held to beliefs in 1. Purgatory, 2. Indulgences in some sense, 3. The Pope. On the other hand, Luther did interpret penance biblically rather than sacramentally, as seen in Thesis 4. The penalty of sin, therefore, continues so long as hatred of self continues, for this is the true inward repentance, and continues until our entrance into the kingdom of heaven. When he wrote the 95 Theses, Luther believes that penance involved a heart condition rather than a ritual performed with a priest. The 95 Theses denied 3 main points of Roman doctrine. 1. There is no such thing as supererogation. 2. The Pope has no jurisdiction over purgatory. 3. Peace comes in the word of Christ through faith. He who does not have this is lost even though he is absolved 1,000,000 times by the Pope. At the time when he wrote the 95 Theses, Luther taught that repentance and faith are synonymous. It is interesting that indulgences were rarely mentioned in the Theses, but when he did mention them, Luther clearly stated that good works are better than indulgences, as in Theses 43 and 45. Concerning indulgences, Luther argued that papal authority is not to the extent that the Pope may dispense or withhold grace. Luther's teaching of the superiority of repentance over indulgences was considered revolutionary, but this teaching was actually preceded by the writings of another Augustinian monk, Gottschalk Holland, who declared in circa 1452, repentance is better than indulgences. In the background of the Theses, then, was the change in Luther's theology gained from his study of Pauline and Augustinian theology. He undertook these studies first as a monk, then as a university professor in Wittenberg. When Luther began teaching against indulgences, many people who considered themselves faithful Catholics began listening to him. In Luther's day, the doctrine taught by the Catholic Church concerning indulgences was extremely vague. Uncertainty over the doctrine of indulgences led many Catholics to believe that they might agree with Luther's teaching against practices associated with the sale of indulgences. When he posted the 95 Theses, Luther was not meaning to attack papal authority in general, but the abuse of the doctrine of indulgences. But many interpreted Luther's intention to discuss and debate as an attack on the power of the papacy. The theses struck a blow at the misuse of indulgences and thereby simultaneously called into question a central position of Catholic piety, the authority of the Pope. Questioning the indulgences instituted by the Pope led others, and eventually Luther himself, to question the Pope's authority in general.